Quick news update. This is what I love about this particular time slot is we get to react to news of the day. Shams Charania from Stadium Sports reports that Kevin Durant is unlikely to play in Game 1. The team has actually released info reiterating that or iterating it if they think it came out first, and that's where he got it from. But if you look at it, it also says that DeMarcus Cousins is expected to play in the NBA Finals. So help is on the way for the Warriors, but it will likely not arrive in the form of Kevin Durant in Game 1. Also, the All-NBA teams are out, and Kevin Durant is not on the first-team All-NBA team. It also ends a run of 11 consecutive years where LeBron James was first-team All-NBA. Obviously, his contracted season because of injuries led to him to only being third-team All-NBA. I don't think he was snubbed. I think Brad Beal, who had an outstanding year, was snubbed. Played, I think, all but one game for the Wizards, put up ridiculous numbers, and because the Wizards weren't good, he received no love. Klay Thompson also didn't get All-NBA love. That hurts Klay Thompson. He cannot be a Supermax player because of it. We'll explain that, but in terms of dollars and cents, I think it's like a $50 million difference over the lifetime of his new contract that he can sign this offseason. So fascinating stuff going on. Do you like James Bond movies? I feel like the Houston Rockets are a James Bond movie. This from Shams Charania of The Athletic. There was something of a clash of styles brewing between the Rockets this season, with members of the team, like Chris Paul, having spirited discussions with Mike D'Antoni about the offense, pushing for more movement, league sources told The Athletic. The type of fast-paced, ball-moving offense is what D'Antoni thrived with in Phoenix, and the two-time Coach of the Year credits to the two-time Coach of the Year's credit, he's adapted it in Houston to allow James Harden to succeed in his game. Charania later added, but Harden and Paul had some tense moments with one another throughout Game 6, culminating in a verbal back-and-forth post-game that went into the locker room. Sources with knowledge of the situation told The Athletic that a verbal exchange happened between Harden and Paul regarding ball distribution through Game 6. By the time the remainder of the locker room was ready to talk, Paul and Harden had gone their separate ways. Chris Paul swiftly making his way to the post-game podium, and the Rockets dispensed with exit interviews this year, so the media hasn't been able to ask Paul or Harden about the disappointment. I like James Bond movies, but I've seen enough of them to know this is generally the way it works, right? Starts with a scene of incredible action where someone who we perceive to be James Bond is met with a near-death experience. And somehow he overcomes that near-death experience. There are car explosions, there are sirens, there are guns, sometimes there are knives, and there's definitely hand-to-hand combat. And at the end of the first scene, there's usually James Bond standing somewhat alive with a woman. Then you start to get some backstory. Bond gets contacted by his bosses. Right? There's some sort of new gadgets that Q gives him, an exploding car, a knife that actually looks like a credit card, an explosive device where you only have to push one cufflink. Come on, we've all seen enough James Bond movies to know those cool gadgets are even better than the stuff that you can buy at Brookstone. Can't buy at Brookstone because I think Brookstone's gone out of business. But you know what I'm talking about. Then there's investigation. There's a foreign land. There's more fighting, more shooting, more knives, more death, but not the death of 007. And at the end, the good guy, 007, wins, and the bad guy usually dies. Oh, yeah, by the way, the final scene is always James Bond with a beautiful woman. Many times, the former woman that was somehow involved with the bad guy. And yet, I think Daniel Craig's on the count for one more. If it comes out, will you go see it? Hell to the yeah, you're gonna. Right? You know how it ends. It's like Rocky. Somehow Rocco pulls this one out. I mean, you mean to tell me the Rockets weren't predictable? They have all the makings of a disappointing, really exciting, really expensive NBA team. You got a brilliant mastermind in Daryl Morey, who surrounds himself with some of the best and brightest thinkers, both from and outside of the basketball world. He hires a renowned offensive coach who's never won anything in the States of any sort of importance, but he's been an unbelievable regular season coach and been so close before in the postseason, and his style is completely and totally, usually, with the exception of with the Rockets, likable and watchable. You mix in James Harden, who's great on offense but has to have the ball constantly, plays very little defense, but is such an amazing talent that he gets a pass during much of the regular season, but he, too, has never won anything. Pair him with Chris Paul, who's in the process of being over the hill, who usually gets hurt, who often challenges teammates, and even when he's right, they fight him towards his challenges, and it ends up leaving with a lot of hurt feelings. And then you look at the storylines of the last 2 years. They're put together to take down one team, the Golden State Warriors. And what failed them? Chris Paul's health. How could we ever have seen that coming? And the three-point shot where they missed 27 consecutive threes in a row. And oh yeah, by the way, supposed home court advantage, which doesn't actually exist in Houston, because if you've been watching over the last half decade, they always lose their last game at home. Fast forward to this season. And now Paul has become more aligned, at least in theory, with this James Harden dominates the ball. I just stand there and watch him go one-on-one and hope the ball comes my way, knowing that it won't work out long term. They tried to add Carmelo. That lasts a month. They get all the way to the playoffs and face the Warriors, and here's the only plot twist. This year, it's the Warriors who lose a player. Actually down 2. DeMarcus Cousins also out, but Kevin Durant out from the midpoint, essentially, of Game 5 and all of Game 6. And they still couldn't get it done. And shocker, Chris Paul has some probably not that nice things to say about James Harden dominating the ball. And even though we all know that Chris Paul is, in fact, right, good luck convincing James Harden to do anything other than what he's been able to win an MVP award doing. Stop me if you heard this before, but a James Harden team. Stop me if you heard this before, but a Chris Paul team. Stop me if you heard this before, but a Mike D'Antoni team came up just short in the playoffs. Oh, yeah, and analytics, great in a large sample size of a regular season, but like the Oakland A's so many times before them, comes up short in the playoffs. And now they hate each other. And, oh, yeah, by the way, in addition to not liking each other, not agreeing in terms of styles that allow them to be successful, you have Chris Paul under contract for the worst 3 years likely of his career, and James Harden under a Supermax deal. And you're so stuck in cap hell that the only way in which you could possibly get rid of, say, a Chris Paul would be to take on 2 or more bad contracts because you're giving away a terrible Albert Pujols-like contract. The dynasty that never was completely and totally predictable, much like a James Bond movie. And much like a James Bond movie, I'm here for. I'll go watch it. I'll buy the popcorn, which is overpriced. I'll sit in that comfy seats, and I'll enjoy the hell out of it. I think I've seen every James Bond movie 2 times over. Just like I've seen every Houston Rockets type of team 2 times over. And this is the way it ends. Poorly.